Hi, I'm Christine. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm here to chat about some of my favorite rakes in historical romances. So today's video is a collab with my sweet friend B from Mama Needs to Read Romance, and I just adore B. We have collabed a few times now, and it's just always a fun time. We both love historical romances, and yeah, I'm so excited to do this collab with her, so definitely check out her video as well. Can't wait to see which rakes she had to share, so definitely go check out her video. I will link her video, her channel, in the description of the video. So thanks again, B, for coming up with this idea so we can talk about some of our favorite historical romance rakes. So speaking of rakes, I'm super curious to hear what you think of when you hear the word like a rake, like a rakish hero, somebody is a rake. Like, I'm curious what how you would describe them, I guess. Like, there is an actual description of what a rake is, but I feel like it's definitely a broad subject as well. Like, it could be somebody who is usually like a man about town, kind of like a modern day playboy, so to speak. It could be somebody who's charming and roguish, somebody who's a little bit of a scoundrel and gets up to some maybe questionable things. So I'm curious, like, what's your definition of a rake? Because when I was making this list, I realized that I could either have endless amounts of recommendations because there's so many heroes that would fit into this category, or I had to like be particular about the ones I wanted to share. So I'm curious, like, what is a rake to you? So when I look up the actual definition of a rake, so it says that a rake is short for rake hell, which I knew. It says it is also synonymous with a hellraiser, or a man who was habituated to immoral conduct, particularly womanizing. So kind of goes with like the playboy kind of image. It also says a rake was also prodigal, wasting his usually inherited fortune on gambling, wine, women, and song, and incurring lavish debts in the process. So kind of what we described, you know, kind of like the gambler, the scoundrel, kind of that roguish guy who's up to maybe no good, but you know, gets on the right path for the right lady in his life. So I realized that a lot of my favorite historical romances do have heroes who could be described as rakes. And I feel like to me, it's just the prime example of a man who maybe was up to no good, doing whatever he wanted and not abiding by the rules, or, you know, going with what society wanted for him. So a bit of a bad boy, which, I mean, I love myself a bad boy. And so also though, he's the type of hero who is going to fall like nobody else compared. Like, he's going to fall to his feet for the woman or the man or whoever, like the object of his affection. He's gonna fall to the ground for them, and like they are the end all be all, like you and you alone. Like, I feel like that's what I love about the kind of rake trope, because we get this character who is just so enamored and obsessed with whoever like the object of their affection is, like, because it could be either the hero or the heroine of the story. And so I just love that. Like, I love seeing somebody completely fall apart, their world changes because of this object of their affection coming into their life. So first up, we have one of my favorite books, favorite heroes of all time, which is Sebastian St. Vincent in Devil in Winter by Lisa Kleypas. So Devil in Winter is the third book in the Wallflower series, and I feel like you'll definitely appreciate this book more if you have seen Sebastian's kind of character throughout, which not going to say you're going to love him all the way through, but you will get a deeper appreciation for his story and for book 3 if you have read book 2 and seen kind of the things he does, which, I mean, we're saying he's a rake, like he's a rake for a reason. So you're going to see some of that scoundrel coming out. Rake heroes also pair really well with one of my favorite combos, which is the rake hero and the wallflower heroine, because they're just like such opposites. This book also has a marriage of convenience, which chef's kiss. I love it so much because it is the heroine Evie's idea for the marriage of convenience. I just love this book. I have reread it multiple times. The Wallflower series is one of my favorite historical romance series of all time. I just love it. Love this book so much. Evie and Sebastian are just like chef's kiss top tier to me. And this book, like, I'm sure you've read this book, but if you haven't, please, please, please go pick it up. So Evie, like I mentioned, is the shy wallflower, and she also has a stutter. She is really tired of having her family very much control everything about her life, all of her decisions and things that she does. Like, they are horrendous to her. And so she decides she needs to get out from under their clutches. And what better way to do that than to go get married to when her husband and her can maybe have a say in her money and her life and her choices. So since Evie is so desperate to get out of this, she goes to a man who she knows is equally as desperate to get out of kind of his life situation as well. And so she ends up going to Sebastian, who is like the rake of all rakes, and he actually is hated by pretty much everybody in both of their lives. So Evie knows that Sebastian is desperately in need of a wealthy wife, just as much as she is desperately in need of the protection of a husband. And so kind of goes from there, with her showing up at his place in the middle of the night, suggesting this trip to Gretna Green to have a very quick marriage of convenience. This book, I love it so much. It's so good. I love the marriage of convenience. I love the shy wallflower with this rakish hero. He's he's definitely more of like an anti-hero situation going on, which you see throughout the story. And I just loved it. Like chef's kiss all around. Lisa Kleypas like can do no wrong. And this book is the perfect example of a rake hero. So moving on to another Sebastian. This one is Lord of Scoundrels by Loretta Chase. Love this book. It's one of my all-time favorites. And here the hero, he is Sebastian again. He also goes by the name that like his title is, which is Dane. This book, we have a kind of compromised marriage of convenience situation. We also have chef's kiss, top tier, enemies to lovers, the banter, the very like fiery and spirited hero and heroine. These two together are just like explosive. I love them so much. The sexual tension, the chemistry, the banter, the like actual hate that they have for one another. So good. We also just have a very damaged hero, which is one of my favorite things of a hero who is kind of trying to push away intimacy, push away love, push away any feeling that he thinks he shouldn't deserve. And so that is definitely Dane in this book. And if you love badass heroines, Jessica Trent is the absolute top of the list for the heroine of all heroines. I love her so much. I think I talked about her in a video I did probably over a year ago that was talking about some of my favorite heroes and heroines of historical romances, which I will link in the description of this video if you want to go back and check that out, because she is just everything and more. So like I mentioned, the hero in here, his name is Sebastian. He's also the Marquess of Dane, and he has a ton of titles slash monikers that people have given to him. So I'm just going to read them. So he is Sebastian, Marquess of Dane, aka the bane and blight of the Ballisters, the greatest whoremonger in Christendom, and the wickedest man who ever lived. Like if that is not our description of a rake, I don't know what else is. So in this one, basically Dane is kind of living it up in Paris, just doing whatever he wants, whenever he wants, when Jessica kind of comes into his life. And from there, he immediately starts to fall, and he doesn't understand like these feelings he's starting to have. So he definitely pushes her away, tries to get away from the feels and all of that. And the passion these two have for one another is just an all-time favorite. Like they run that line of hate and love so well and play amongst it with one another, and it is just like so good. Like if you want like explosive banter and chemistry and tension and all of the things, definitely read this book. Like it is a top tier, like one of my favorite books of all time. I love it so much. Like enemies to lovers, banter, compromised marriage of convenience, a hero who thinks he's damaged and tortured and not worthy of the heroine, all the things. He seduces her in Italian. Like stop, go read this book and maybe come back and watch the rest of these recs. All right, so then going back to another favorite, I think we're going to talk about my favorites first, and then from there we'll talk about the rest. So we have Dreaming of You by Lisa Kleypas again. This one we follow the amazing, the wonderful Derek Craven. So I'm sure if you have read historical romances, you have heard of Derek Craven. If you haven't read this book yet, please go read his book. It is so good. Lisa Kleypas is like the queen of self-made men heroes. Derek Craven is just like the epitome of my favorite type of hero. He is damaged, he is scarred, he has pulled himself up from nothing and has made something of himself. He is emotionally damaged. He doesn't want to have any of these feelings towards a woman. And he gets totally thrown off of his feet when the heroine Sarah comes into his life. So like I mentioned, Derek is a self-made man, and he seems to have it all. He has a successful club, he has the wealth, he has the homes, he has the land, he has any woman he could ever dream of having at his disposal. He has art, he's a collector. The one thing he doesn't have in his life though is the heroine Sarah, and once she comes into his life, he definitely realizes what his life has been missing. So yeah, Derek Craven has come from nothing, and he has a horrible backstory, which you learn in the story, and then he is now the wealthiest man in London. And so the heroine is kind of an aspiring author. She wants to write books, and so one night she is out on the streets trying to come up with ideas, and she sees this man who ends up being Derek getting attacked in the kind of alleyway, and she steps in to protect him. Like this book is just so good. I feel like I'm gonna say chef's kiss a ton in this rec video because I like these books are just chef's kiss. Like they're so good. The amount of swooniness from these heroes, like they're just so good. Like they're making me want to go reread all of these over again because I love them so much and miss that like all-encompassing feeling. And yeah, so if you haven't read these books, definitely go read them. So like I mentioned at the beginning, how these heroes kind of lives get turned upside down when they meet the heroines, and that is definitely the case for Derek when he meets Sarah. She totally turns his life upside down, and he is just willing to do whatever it takes to kind of please her and win her, and I just love their book so much. Like this quote in particular just like kind of sums up exactly what I'm talking about. So let's get into it. Derek didn't think he would be able to take his hands from her when the waltz ended. He couldn't risk letting go of her, the one gift Providence had ever seen fit to bestow on him. Everything else he'd had to work, suffer, steal, and cheat for. It had all required effort, but she had simply appeared like a perfect fruit dropping from a tree into his outstretched hands. He was almost lightheaded with the desire. Just so good. How can you not love this hero? All right, so next up I have two books from Julia Quinn. They're both in the Bridgerton series. So first first up is The Viscount Who Loved Me with Anthony Bridgerton. I love this book so much, one of my favorites. It again has that enemies to lovers banter, and it is just so good. Basically in here, Anthony ends up falling for the sister of the woman that he is supposed to be courting. So this book is the second book in the Bridgerton series. It has already had a season on Netflix, but that one's going to be different than the book is. So in this one, Anthony is described as kind of the ultimate rake about town. He does whatever he wants. He kind of pushes people away. He doesn't want to let love into his life, but he knows it's about time that he ends up settling down. And so he decides, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to settle down now for the sake of my family. He's kind of the leader of his family. And so he decides to settle down. And if he's going to settle down, he's going to have some rules that the woman who he's going to find is going to fit into. So basically he says the woman that he's trying to look for in a bride, she has to be kind of attractive enough, intelligent, and most importantly, somebody that he's not going to fall in love with. So he ends up setting his sights on kind of the jewel of the season, who ends up being Edwina, and he decides, you know what, that's her. Like, that's who I'm gonna make my bride. And so his brothers and kind of his friends around him tell him that, oh, to get to Edwina, you actually have to get through her sister, Kate, and kind of appease to Kate before you can even have a chance of getting Edwina's hand. And so he's like, oh, this is gonna be easy, like no big deal. And then we find out from Kate's POV that Kate literally hates Anthony and everything that he stands for. She knows that he is an absolute rake. She doesn't want him anywhere near her precious sister. And so she is determined to kind of push him away from her. So it has the perfect enemies to lovers setup, and the banter between these two is just top tier, so good. I love them together. They get into some funny and hilarious predicaments together as they're kind of pushed together all the time while he's trying to kind of court her sister. And of course it goes from there. It is just so good. Please read this book if you love Hate to Love and kind of this huge family, the Bridgerton family. Like, they're so good together. Definitely read The Viscount Who Loved Me. All right, and then next we have When He Was Wicked, also by Julia Quinn. This is the 6th book in the Bridgerton series, and this is my favorite book in the series. If you want angsty and emotional, this book is all of that and more. I love this book so much, but it's definitely going to rip your heart out and make you hurt. This book has a really fun setup because basically in here we follow Francesca, who is one of the Bridgertons, who you don't really see a lot of throughout the entire series, but in her book, she definitely shines. We learn that she kind of went away from her family and ended up getting married. She has been happy, she's been in love, and then tragically and sadly, her husband ends up passing away when the story starts, and she is devastated. So then we end up meeting Michael Sterling, and he is the cousin of Francesca's late husband, and so he kind of has always been into her since the first time that he met her, but then he realized that she was with his cousin, and so he had to kind of step back and kind of went off and did his own like rakish ways while he couldn't have the woman that he really wanted in life. And so now they're kind of back in the same circle. He was the heir to his cousin, so he has taken over the, I'm pretty sure, the earldom. So yeah, now Michael is the earl and he comes back. He's been away for 4 years, and so while he was away, kind of Francesca was still grieving, and Michael didn't want to be around during the first sudden grief of it all, so he took off, he went and did his thing, he was very much a rake, did all of that, and so now he's back to kind of take over the earldom, and he's back around Francesca, who she always thought they were kind of close, that they were friends, and she kind of learns that he obviously has had more feelings for her all of these years, and so it slowly goes from there, and it's just, so beautiful, so angsty, so good. I love this one so much. If you've never continued on in the Bridgerton series, I highly recommend, especially to get to this book. It is just, so good, so good. Next up is Any Duchess Will Do by Tessa Dare. This is, I think, the 4th book in the Spindle Cove series, and it is my favorite in the series. I love this book so much. This one has a great class difference setup, so if you love that in historical romances, this definitely has that as well. This book has all of the kind of wit and charm that I adore from Tessa Dare's historical romances, but it definitely packs in some emotions as well that I wasn't ready for the first time that I read this one. Basically in here, we follow the hero Griffin. He is a duke, and he is not ready to settle down, so he is off doing whatever he wants. And so basically one day his mama is tired of him kind of wasting away doing whatever he wants, and so she ends up abducting / kidnapping her own son and dropping him off at Spindle Cove, which is this place where a bunch of women live basically. And so she drops him off there and is like, you're gonna pick a bride and get married because like I'm tired of you messing around. So his mom basically tells him that she can make any woman into the proper duchess, and so he decides, you know what, I'm gonna put that to the test and I'm gonna pick the serving girl over here for you to kind of make into a duchess. And so that's what he ends up doing, and that's how he meets the heroine Pauline. So the This one has a very My Fair Lady vibe to it as well, which I absolutely loved. So like I mentioned, Pauline is kind of the servant girl at this local tavern that they end up at in Spindle Cove. She's also the farmer's daughter, and she decides, you know what, I'm gonna go along with it and have some fun, like for this Duchess in training kind of situation. And so the hero Griff kind of knows that she wants to have some fun with it as well, and he decides, you know what, I will pay you to go along with this Duchess in training that my mom wants to put you through, and I want you to like fail miserably to kind of prove to my mom that this isn't gonna work. But of course, the joke is on Griff and Pauline, because not only does it work, like she's an amazing Duchess to be, and they kind of fall for one another along the way. This one is just so much fun. I love the heroine. She's so brave and witty. I love the banter between them. It is just so, so good. I love how Pauline kind of easily fits into the hero's family life and all of that with his mom and his sister. She just like really fits in with them all. And I love in here how we get, like I said, this My Fair Lady kind of like Duchess in training moments. It is just so good. Like if you love class difference romance, I highly recommend this. I feel like the Spindle Cove series isn't talked about quite as often nowadays, but I highly recommend it. It has so many great gems in it like this book. So next up is The Rakes by Scarlett Peckham, and in here we have a heroine who is the kind of rakish character, hence the name of the book. I will say that this book is very dark and moody and broody. It has a lot of like very emotional, heavy themes to it as well. Very heartbreaking, so just know that going in. The author does provide like an author's note at the beginning of the story that kind of sets the tone and the vibe of the whole book. Like very dark and moody is the description I would give for it, and it definitely fits that, but it is so beautiful if you're into that type of book. So this book, The Rakes, is basically, like I said, a gender role reversal of the classic rake trope, and it was just everything I wanted and more. This book takes place in 1790s, and we follow the heroine Seraphina, who is just very much this forward-thinking feminist of her time who is fighting for kind of women's rights. She's in Cornwall for the summer at her family's home, and she is deciding to write her memoir and kind of expose the patriarchy, and so she is doing that when she ends up meeting the hero. Seraphina gets a lot of hate in this book because of her very much like radical ideas about women's rights and all of those things. She's also just very open with her sexuality and taking lovers and all of that. And so she honestly gets treated like crap by a lot of people in the story. So one of the nights when she's there working on her memoir is when she meets the hero Adam, and he's basically a local architect. He is just there kind of working and doing his projects for the summer. And so she meets him and is instantly kind of attracted to him. And so she offers up for him to like spend some of the nights with her. In here, Adam is a single father who's just trying to kind of focus on his career when she ends up kind of asking of this of him. So this book, while we see the romance as well, like I said, it does deal with some heavier themes and topics, and so it really focuses a lot on other things as well. It kind of heavily deals with how women of the time are unfairly treated and the unequal ways of like the actions of men and women being looked at by others. There are a lot of content warnings for this book as well. Like I said, it does deal with some heavier, kind of darker topics, so just know that going in. I know I put them in my Goodreads review back when I read this book a few years ago, so definitely go check that out if you need them. But if you're in the mood for kind of dark, broody, moody, with the heroine being the one who's the Rakes, definitely check out this book by Scarlett Peckham. Next up, I have The Good Girl's Guide to Rakes by Ava Lee. This is the first book in her Last Chance Scoundrels series. This book, we follow the hero, who he is kind of this rake about town who is always getting into trouble, but he's secretly a romantic at heart who even writes poetry, which I absolutely loved. This book starts off with him getting into trouble at the beginning of the story. Basically, he and his brother end up helping their best friend leave his bride-to-be at the altar, and the bride-to-be also happens to be his sister, so he gets into a lot of hot water with his family when the story starts. So the series follows these three guys who are friends, and basically all of their families are tired of them kind of doing whatever they want, making these careless choices, and just kind of being rakes, and so they basically tell them, you know what, clean up your act, get it together, find a respectable bride, and settle down or you're gonna risk getting cut off. So that's basically the gist of the whole series, and we follow all of the heroes kind of find their way. And in this one, he ends up falling for his best friend's younger sister, who he kind of enlists to help him on his journey to find a respectable bride. Basically in here, the hero comes to the heroine and he's like, hey, I know you go to all of these parties and balls where all of the kind of respectable people of Tawn and the society are at. Like, will you help me get invited to these and kind of find the right brides to be for me? So she says she'll help him as long as he is willing to take her after hours to the most disreputable places where all of these scandalous people are going and doing things that her eyes have never seen before. So I just love this one. Such a good setup. The whole series is a lot of fun. Book 3 is definitely my favorite, but this one is just a good intro to the series, and we get to see this very like rakish hero. Next up is Love Only Once by Joanna Lindsay. So this is actually the first book in her Mallory Anderson family series, and I love this one so much. I've been meaning to continue on in the series and I just haven't, so I definitely need to get back into it because I read this one a couple years ago now and absolutely loved it. So basically in this one, it starts off kind of where the heroine is in the wrong place at the wrong time, where she ends up getting into the wrong carriage after a party and gets kind of swept away and abducted and taken to a house for the night. So basically the hero, he he saw his ex-mistress going to this party and he saw her carriage there. And so he was like, ooh, I know she's really wanting to go to this party, so I'm just gonna have some fun with her. Like, it's all in fun, no like hard feelings for like anybody involved. He's just like messing around with her. And so he decides, you know what, like she's not gonna go to this party. I'm going to like whisk her away to my house and then kind of like, you know, not let her go to this party that she's looking forward to. So he ends up doing that and has like his men or people take the carriage away to his house, kind of lock up the heroine in a room, and he ends up going to the party, and then he sees his ex-mistress there and is like, oh my God, like, wait a minute, if you're here, like, who the heck did I just kidnap? And so it kind of goes from there. He ends up rushing to his house, finding the heroine there, which she's actually like laughing at the whole situation because she finds it to just be hilarious. And so, like I said, there's no like hard feelings towards anybody. He just meant it in like fun, like he wasn't gonna mess with the ex-mistress or anything. It was just like a fun, funny little prank. And so it kind of goes from there where they end up spending time together, kind of getting to know one another. And the only thing is like they're spending a whole night together. And so they kind of end the night with him like, okay, like we'll take you back to your house and kind of deliver you to where you need to be. And she's like, yeah, like it's fine, like nothing will come of this, like nobody's gonna care that I was with you all night. And so of course it doesn't go that way, and it kind of evolves from there. But I just love this one. It has such a fun setup and it's just such a fun time. Like if you love the Bridgerton series, definitely check out the Mallory Anderson series, which is older, but this first book, like so good. I love the whole family dynamics. Like I said, I need to continue on and like maybe I will after this, but yeah, just a fun time. Love only once. All right, so those are the Rake-ish heroes and heroine that I have to talk about today. I also wanted to throw in some fake rakes as well, because there are quite a few historical romances that have this kind of fun, like let me turn you into a fake rake setup. And so we have two of them. The first one is It Takes a Rake by Anna Bennett. This is a newer book. It just came out, I think, in the end of January. It's the third book in her Rogues to Lovers series, and this one was just a fun time. I love how this whole series is set outside of London, away from society, away from the town, where we are at this kind of like seaside harbor town, and we kind of follow just like the everyday man and women there. So it has a really fun setup and setting. And in here, the hero and the heroine were kind of rivals as kind of teenagers. They both worked for his grandfather's architect firm, and the heroine always saw the hero as kind of her rival, where he's actually always been secretly into her. And so we see him moving back to their town after being away for a couple years, and he's back to take over his grandfather's architect firm, and the heroine still works there as well. And so they're kind of around each other again. And so the hero decides, you know what, like I'm tired of waiting around. I want to show her, admit to her, like I have these feelings for her. And so he thinks this is like the perfect time to do so now that he's moved back. So at the same time, the town is kind of holding this architectural contest, and so the heroine wants to enter, and she ends up asking the hero for help because while she has like great creative ideas, she's not always so great with like the measurements and the numbers of everything. So she asks him for help. So she says in exchange for his help, she'll turn him into this rake that she knows his secret crush is going to be into. And so basically she doesn't know that his secret crush is her. And so she's kind of like forming and creating him to be this perfect like rakish hero because she thinks that's what all ladies are into. And so the whole time he's just like, you're just like making me perfect for you, but like I'm not going to tell you yet. So it's just so much fun. Like I love the whole like fake rake setup because the hero is definitely not a rake, and it's just such a fun time, like where he's secretly been pining for her. So much fun. I love that they're both architects. This one definitely check out if you want like a newer historical romance. And then the next one with another fake rake is literally called My Fake Rake. This is by Ava Lee as well. This is the first book in her Union of the Rakes series, and this book is just so sweet and charming and fun. I feel like if you want kind of that vibe from historical romances, Ava Lee definitely delivers on that. This one is a super cute fake romance set up between these two super adorable scholarly friends. Basically in here, the heroine is a herpetologist, which means she's a scientist who studies reptiles and amphibians, and the hero is a scientist as well. He's an anthropologist, and so they met one day at the library and they just became fast friends, and so they're always there kind of studying and doing research together. So they've been friends for years, but he's secretly been pining for her and into her, and she has no idea. So the heroine has this crush on this very like handsome, well-celebrated naturalist who has come back home and is back after doing some research, and so she decides she wants to kind of get his attention and maybe he'll be into her. And so she thinks the perfect way to get a man's attention is to have another man interested in me. So she ends up asking the hero, who is her friend, and she's like, hey, can you pretend to like court me? Because if you're showing interest, like other men will then think I'm interesting and like also show interest in me. And so he's like, well, I have no idea like how to be kind of this like super charming rakish guy. And so they go to him, one of his friends, to kind of help him learn how to become a rake. And so it goes from there of them trying to pretend to court, and he's like totally into it because, you know, he's secretly into her, and is just so cute and charming. It's such a fun time. If you love like two kind of nerdy friends falling for one another, this book is definitely that. All right, so those are all of the rakish recommendations I have for you today. Like I said, I threw in some fake rakes as well, just because I feel like we need to give them some love too. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you want to let me know some of your favorite kind of rake heroes or heroines, definitely let me know in the comments. I would love to check out some more, or we can gush over some of our favorites too. Definitely make sure to go check out Bee's video. I'm going to do so as well. I can't wait to see which rakish heroes she talks about. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I will see you in my next one.